think I missed one, but okay. Okay, good morning. We're going to go ahead and get started. It's 10 o'clock. My name's Jackie Sledge, and I'm a master gardener and have been since 2013. Thank you. And today we're going to talk a little bit about the big country plants. If you've lived here very long, or even if you haven't lived here very long, you probably even know more if you haven't lived here very long, how difficult it is to garden in this area. Do you have heavy clay soil that it may take 3 or 4 days to be able to dig the hole to plant something? And then others have the sand where the water just goes right through it. It's very difficult to find the right combination of plant to your soil and to our weather. So we're going to talk a little bit about that. And it's choosing the right plant to go in the right place. And I love this picture. This could be my house if I didn't think it through. What is the right plant? Let's try some of everything. And it's really pretty, but it's a little more than I want to try to keep up. But they have lots of plants. And then we've got that extreme of just grass. And that we're trying to get away from having big expanses of grass. It's expensive to take care of, takes lots of water, lots of mowing time. And if I'm going to spend time outside, I'd rather be doing this than mowing that. So they say that a good balance would be a third, and a third. A third turf grass, a third lawn, and a third in beds. And that's not a hard and fast rule, but it is something to think about, some balance in your landscape. So some of the things to think about is what makes the perfect plant for your landscape. You need to look at the hardiness zone, and that indicates how cold the plant can tolerate the temperature. And we used to be in zone 7B, and they have now reevaluated things, and we're in 8A. I'm still looking at 7s because our temperature gets a little colder than what 8 does. And so we'll look at that. And then they have started a heat zone because some plants, if you're looking at getting them to tolerate the cold, you also need to look, can they tolerate the heat? I know we've had extremes the last few years. We had Snowmageddon with the ice and the cold. This past year, we also had wind chills and the negative temperatures, and that really did affect a lot of the plants here. They just did not survive well. They're struggling this spring. And then last summer, with all the 100-plus temperatures, that weakened them. Then the cold, they bounced back and forth with how they can tolerate the weather here. So the heat zone, and I laughed when I read this because they said how many days above 86 would be considered hot for them to not be able to tolerate. If we had 86-degree days during the summer, we would think it was wonderful. But that's how they have evaluated the heat zone. And then the moisture requirement. We look for plants that are drought tolerant or require little water, or maybe you like some in an area where you've got more water and drainage that would go through there, moist soil. And then I just mentioned a while ago, the soils in the big country are either clay or sand, not much in between. And light requirement. Some plants love sun, some plants like shade, and then some take either, some of each of them. So you need to look at the plant and see how it would work in your yard. And then the size. I am always looking at plants and trees when I'm going down the street, and I will admit I've done some really bad things in the past. Trees look so good up closer to the house or close to the fence when they're about this tall, but when they get to be 20 or 30 feet, those roots are going under your house. They can damage your sidewalks or driveways. So you need to place them where they will not be damaging your other property. We moved into a house, 30 years ago, I guess, and we thought, this is great. We have this blank landscape, and my husband grew up in the country. Well, I grew up in a small town, but his idea of what to do with a yard was way different. He grew up north, and he wanted trees, lots of trees. And so we planted lots of trees. I'm not going to tell you where my old house is, because I'm sure you drive by it and go, what were those people thinking? And I would keep saying, I'm going to ring the doorbell and tell them, you're not taking care of these trees, because you still have the dead from the snow in there, and it's going to break and fall, and you already have limbs on the house. You need to cut them. But if they're so close to the house, you can have a lot of damage to your house, either from limbs or roots. If they're too close, you see them growing out this way. If you live where you have overhead power lines, they grow up. And one of the worst things is if you don't keep them trimmed and the utility company trims them for you, they just come out and cut. So just be sure and think about the mature size, not only of trees, but all your other plants. This is the hardiness zone for the cold. And we are right in, I know, I can see it. I'm going to have to back up. I can't read it that far.
Straight down.
Yes, straight down. Okay. So this is what we used to be included in, the 7B. And some of our county is still in 7B, and part of it is in 8A. So that's why we're so close. And the temperature range for a 7B goes down to 5 degrees. And we have some 5-degree weather here during the winter. And the 8A, it goes down to 10 degrees. And, that 5 degrees can make a difference to some of the plants. So just be aware of that when you're buying them. Some other things to consider. Think about the plant itself. Once you know your zone, what type of light do you get? Everybody has different light. You may have trees, you may have fences, you may have neighbors' trees, you may have structures on the property next to you that would affect the light coming into your house. How big is the area you're going to plant? I will tell you that we always recommend maybe starting a little smaller and then expanding. If you start really large and realize it's too much, it's kind of hard to downsize it. So we like to start a little smaller. And then the size of mature plants. Do you want to replace the plants every season? If you like to do that, then annuals would be great if that's the main part of your landscape. If you want to have big anchors that you don't have to replace and just add some color, then you want more perennials because they will come back year after year. Do you want to attract butterflies or bees or birds? Then find the plants that would be attractive to them. And then finally, are you going to plant in the ground or in raised beds or in pots? So let's look at a few of those. On the light needs, look at your yard several times during the day, because you may have sun in the morning or sun in the afternoon, depending on which way your house faces. Also the trees. If you get sun in the morning, the midday, afternoon, or all day. I have sun in almost all day in the majority of my yard. But I do have one area where the trees have gotten large enough I have shade. So I want to make sure that I don't plant a plant that is 100% sun in that area. And then look at the full sun. The growers don't think about the big country when they think full sun, or Texas in general. Full sun to them is a lot cooler than our full sun, and they'll say 6 hours a day. So be sure that you get plants that can tolerate our sun and heat here. And then the space. You want to look at it, like I said a while ago, the mature size of the plant instead of how it looks now. And that's so hard for me, I will admit that, because when I plant, I want immediate gratification. I want it to look like it's been there for a long time. So a lot of times I do overplant. And if I'm going to do that, I put my perennials in, because those are going to be there forever. And then I put some annuals around that to give it a fuller look. And that way you do get a nice look. But that one did not happen overnight. It took years for it to grow that size. If you want to give some grade to your plants, put the tall ones in the back, and then the medium ones, and then the short ones are the ground cover, to make it look good. And that's what they always used to talk about. And if you have a bed out in the middle of the yard, you want to put the tall one in the middle and then plant all the way around so it has a good look from any direction. So this is an example of what to do with annuals or perennials. If you want to replace the landscape every year, the one on the left has the shrubs that will be there, but all the flowers are annuals. So these petunias are not going to last all year, and when they start looking bad, you'll need to dig them up and replace them. The other one is a permanent landscape. Those are all perennial plants, and it's just going to keep looking like that. Now in the winter, it's going to look different, but if you're enjoying spring, summer, and fall, this is the way you would do it with perennials. And most of us would like to attract the wildlife to our yards. And I gave you a list of plants for pollinators, and there's a big crossover. All of them, like some plants, for bees, birds, and butterflies. I have red salvias that I planted along the front porch, and my cat always lets me know when the hummingbirds and the butterflies or the bees are back, because she's in the window banging at the window at all of the animals that come to that red salvia, because it is something that will attract all three of them. But you can see the milkweed and the lantana. And they're very attractive plants, any of these for the animals, so just look for those. Another thing, if you're talking about yards, do you want a vegetable garden? If so, do you want to plant it in the ground, or do you want to do raised beds? I grew up living with my grandmother much of the time, and I was so fortunate. But used to, in the olden days, you had a vegetable garden, you had a flower garden, you had trees, you had grass, and they couldn't touch each other, And now it's really a good thing to mix them. I plant my tomatoes and peppers in my flower beds with my flowers. And then when I'm working on that, if I want to eat a tomato while I'm out there, I've got one right there handy. But they are also good companion plants. And I plant marigolds almost everywhere. They tend to deter some of the insects that we don't want around. So I do like to mix flowers with my vegetable garden. I have gotten to where I am using more raised beds in my yard and pots because it's just easier. If I have a raised bed, I can sit along the edge, and I don't have to worry about trying to struggle and get up off the ground. It's just getting more and more difficult. So I am trying to simplify my yard. Grow bags, it's another way you can plant. They make them individually, or they make large ones like this where you can plant your whole garden in it. You know, they have that concept of square foot gardening where you have a 3 by 3 and you can plant all these different plants and eat everything you need out of that one little garden. You can do the same thing in a grow bag. Tip, if you're going to use a grow bag, make sure you have it where you want it, because once you put the soil in, you're not going to be able to move it. They're very heavy. So make sure you have it where you want it before you fill it with soil. And then the other one is a mix of flowers and vegetables. I'm a huge cinder block lover. I like to build things with cinder blocks because they're very stable and they're sturdy. I don't have to replace them. We had built steps into our storage building, and I had to replace them every so often because the wood just would wear, rot, and then I thought, why don't I use cinder blocks? So the last time I did the steps, I used cinder blocks and did them, and they'll be there forever. But on this one, it's a vegetable garden, but then it's planted with flowers all the way around it. So it gives a very attractive look. One of the classes that I went to talked about taking even old cinder blocks like that, and you can mosaic the sides, or you can paint them. We did some with master gardeners and used the stencils and put butterflies and bees and all kinds of things on them, and they make them very attractive. And I stacked mine 3 levels high and just made a flower bed and then did small plants in it. I also used some to put my house number on. Then I've got my house number and then I've got my plants there. So there are a lot of things you can do with cinder blocks. So you need to look at water needs and how close you're going to be to water. With the restrictions, you know, we can water 3 times a week now, but depending on how much rain we get, they may cut it back to 2 times, and I can remember 1 time. So we have to remember our friends, our plant friends, when we are planting them. I never buy anything that requires lots and lots of water. I have a master gardener friend who is so conservation oriented that, you know, when you turn your shower on to get it to warm up or in the sink, she always has a bucket there and catches all that water, and then she puts it aside and uses that to water her plants. And then if you boil potatoes to make mashed potatoes, cool that, and it can be recycled as water for your plants. All kinds of ways to save on water. When you're planting in your bed, though, if you've got, I love to water plants. So I'm not good with succulents, and I did make the mistake of having all my nice flowers, and then I had some succulent-y things, and they don't want the water. And you can't just say, don't share. It's going to go everywhere when you do that, water them. And you need to be sure that all the plants you put in one area have the same water requirement. Otherwise, you're going to have some that do really, really well and some that don't do well, and they actually may die. And so just be sure and look at that. Then again, I mentioned the pollinators, and berries are really popular to a lot of birds. If you plant things like hollies, I have nandinas, beauty berries, all kinds of shrubs that have berries on them, you will have more birds come into your yard, and they're fun to watch. Be sure and have a water source for them too. Okay, now where are you going to plant? I mentioned the raised beds. These are really attractive raised beds. But you can do vegetable gardens, you can do flower gardens in them. And these, you can tell, have been planted to get part sun, part shade. And so the plants that are put in there would need to be part sun, part shade plants. Pots, Oh goodness, you can plant anything in a pot. I also use big planter pots on the back porch, and I plant tomatoes in them. And I will plant tomatoes early in the year. And then if it gets cold, they're on a plant dolly and I can bring them in. And then when it warms up, they can go back outside. Same thing in the summer. I can protect them from the heat by bringing them in and then putting them back out. It extends the life of the tomato plant, so we have tomatoes for a long time. So pots are good. I had a question at the other session about what kind of pots to use, and that's really a preference. Do you like the decorative ones? Do you like terracotta ones? Whatever you want that fits into your landscape. And then there are some of the smaller grow bags that can be used. I like the look of that it's the same as a pot. I will tell you that after, I think we'd had some in some grow bags for about 5 years, and they were facing the west, so they got full sun, and they did start deteriorating some, and I've replaced them, but they made me happy because you could buy them in all colors, and it just accentuates your plants. And then planters. Planters can be any size, shape, form. And I liked this one because if you have like a narrow porch or just don't have much area at all, you can go up with a planter. And most of the time we think of planters going long ways or larger, but there are ways you can use planters to go up and save space. Another consideration is how do you get to your beds? If I have to walk over my grass/mud to get to my flower beds or my vegetable garden, I have to pick my time to go out and work in them or to pick produce or whatever. And so it's always good to have some walkways to get to gardens. And they can be any type of walkway. It adds a lot of visual interest to your yard too. And this one is very simple. This one is just using the grass that's already there and doing pavers, and you can walk on it. We did one of those years ago when our grandsons were small, and they could spend hours jumping from rock to rock, and they thought it was great fun, and it kept them occupied. But so any amount of money, you can do concrete if you want to really go big. And then mix it up. There are a lot of things you can do and insert in your garden to make it interesting. You can do something in ground. You can add these. That's an interesting feature. I like bird baths to have something for the animals that visit my house. And rocks, yard art, sitting areas, ponds. On my bucket list that I will probably never get to, I have a pond. I just think ponds are so inviting, but I do like them. These are some sitting areas. This one on the left, when you landscape around that, select plants that would work well either with the grass and also any of the ambient heat that would come from the rock or the bricks. And so, but it makes very attractive. And I like that one because they even added window boxes to make it look more like a room. And that would be very enjoyable. The other one, I like it. It has screening behind you so you don't see the fence and area, and it's a much less expensive sitting area that you can incorporate in. But they've used the plants very well, and you can see all the pots that they have put at different levels there too. And then the ponds, small pond, large pond. And of course they are landscaped very well too. So, easy to grow plants. I have to talk about Texas Superstars because I really, really think that there are some easier to grow plants. I'm not going to say easy, but easier, and they're more, they're hardier. So these have been selected by the Texas Superstar Committee as being very good plants. They are grown in trials across the state. For a while they were grown mainly north down to San Antonio and Corpus, and the west side of the state had been totally neglected, but now they have trials in Lubbock. So the things that are trialed in Lubbock, we figure are going to do a lot better here too. They've grown with minimal soil preparation and reasonable levels of water and no pesticides. And if these plants grow year after year, then they figure that these could be named superstars. They also have to be sure that growers will be able to produce a large quantity of them to be able to provide to the public. So they're tough, but they're also beautiful, and they are selected to be used across the state. But that doesn't mean that every superstar will grow in every section of the state. I gave you a list of the Texas superstars, and many of these do grow well here. The ones that don't are the things like the citrus trees. You don't see many citrus trees here. They require a different type of soil, more water, just a different environment. I'm not saying you can't grow them here, but you would have to do a lot of work. I have a friend who is growing, or has been growing for years, a lemon tree, because lemon trees made her happy. Her lemon tree is in a big pot. It's on a plant dolly. It goes out when the weather is good. It comes in when the weather is not. It lives in her house all winter long because it would not survive in our cold weather. She is so happy. She really is. And she's going to add an orange tree pretty soon because she wants to have a friend for her lemon tree. But again, you can do it if you want to. Now, it's not a superstar, but there was a person who moved here from East Texas and loved the azaleas. Azaleas are not acclimated to West Texas. They don't like our soil. They don't like our heat, but they wanted one, and they had money to do it. So they excavated all of the soil and built big beds and planted azaleas. And every year they had to add the amendments to keep it acidic so that the azaleas would continue to grow. They would be covered when it was too cold. They babied those plants, oh my goodness, and they were gorgeous. However, they moved to a different, out of Abilene place. And the person who bought their house, they thought they were wonderful. And then the next year when they realized how much work they were going to be, they had them all dug up and they planted things that were more native to this part of the country, which was really sad. I enjoyed driving by and seeing the azaleas, but not everybody wants to put that much time and that much money into it. So you can do whatever you want to, but just realize that you may have to work a little harder and spend more money. And if you're doing these, you need to look at the hardiness zone, make sure it's for our area. And like I said, you spend time and money. The soil amendment, sun and shade. Oh, I forgot to say, he had to build a retractable canopy over him to keep the sun out. I mean, it was a lot of work. Okay, native and adapted plants. These are easier to grow even than superstars because that's what grows here. They have evolved in our climate and they have done well and they keep returning. So they are more resistant to the pest problems because they have been here for a long time and they're used to these particular pests. They adapted natives, they've been introduced here, but they came from climates that are similar to ours. I know a number of ours here in West Texas have come from areas like New Mexico and Arizona, because they're arid, they're even drier and hotter than we are, but yet those plants survive, and so some of them do come from there. And again, just because it's a Texas native doesn't mean it's going to be native and able to grow in all areas of the state. So if you want to know what actually grows here in Abilene or in Taylor County, if you go to the Aggie Horticulture website, they have a list. You can put in any county in the state, and it will give you the vegetable varieties that have been trialed and are good in that county. And I brought the one for Taylor County, and a lot of these you'll recognize because they, you know, celebrity tomatoes. Everybody knows those, but these are just the varieties, and I thought if you wanted to do vegetables, you might try some of the ones that are supposed to do well here. And then they also have a list of trees county by county, and so it will show you what will grow best here. I work, John mentioned I work on the plant sale, and I look at a lot of the growers across the state, and I'm highly amused by some of them. One of the big tree growers in the south part of Texas, and then one in Arizona that I follow their sites, they sell mesquite trees. And I know it would ruin our reputation if you went in to buy plants from us at a plant sale and we're selling mesquites, right? We're all trying to get them out of our yards, but I mean, I don't. I have one in my yard. But it's whatever area of the country you're living in, there's something different out there that they want, and people in other parts of the country want our mesquites, probably until they have them. Anyway, and they also have a list of earth kind plants by region, and those are the ones that are also very good for the environment for us. And I gave you the list of native plants that are good, and as I didn't print out all the trees in the earth kind, but all of that is so readily available. It's very interesting. So we have our plants, we have our superstar or our native plant, and we're going to plant. First of all, you need to know how to plant it, and if you don't know what your soil is like or if it's in good shape, you can get a soil sample. I think John has some back there, and get that. They recommend that you do it about every 3 years, because if you've added anything, it could change your soil. So we've got the soil, we've got the location, we've got our plants, so we need to dig a hole that's big enough for your plant. Now, I don't buy the great big ones, because again, it would take me a week to dig a hole. I have to dig like this, and then put water, and then dig some more, and put water, let it dry a little, and then dig more. And so it does take me several days to dig a hole big enough for a big pot. But dig that, and then you take it out of the plastic. Now, I brought a couple of things. If you're really particular about a color, this one I know is going to be a purple petunia. This one is best guess. It was in the flat that said purple, but you know, when people pick up a plant and they decide they don't want it, wherever the first hole is where that plant goes, right? And so this may or may not be purple. We always try to encourage people to buy plants when they're in bloom, so that if you really have to have a certain color, that way you know what it is. Especially an investment like a crepe myrtle. How many colors of crepe myrtles are there? And if you need to replace one and want to stay with the same color, it should always be in bloom when you buy it. Okay, So I have my plant, and when I take it out of the pot, see, these plants don't even tell me what color they are. It just says petunia. So it's a best guess. So when you take it out of there, you look pretty carefully at, now this one is in good shape. It doesn't have the roots that are going around and around. If you don't break it up, then that's exactly what's going to continue. But you need to tickle the roots. You need to tickle all of this, kind of break it away. That makes it happy, gives it some air, and then you can bring the roots down a little bit, and then it'll be ready to put in the ground. I have been places where we have dug up plants that have died, and they were in 4-inch pots like this, and when we dug them up, they were still in the same shape like this. If they're in a shape like this, the roots are not going anywhere, and it's not going to be as healthy a plant as this one will be, because the roots are free and they'll be able to get out into the soil. And so I will tell you what a lot of places recommend, and then I'll tell you what I do. They will say that it's good to go ahead and clip the blooms off, because this plant is going to be struggling for a little bit and using all of the energy to get it acclimated. And if you have a bloom here, the energy is going to go up to keep the blooms alive, or to keep more blooms coming on. If the blooms are off, then it's going to make the plant grow stronger. I leave my blooms on. I mean, like I said a while ago, I need immediate gratification. If I want this purple plant in my yard, I want to see it now, not in 2 or 3 weeks when it decides it wants to bloom. But, you know, that's totally up to you. I'm giving you a couple of options there. But on this one, this petunia that says petunia, I'm going to plant it, and if it's pink, it'll be fine. I'll be okay. Or if it's white, if it's purple, then it'll have a friend. But if you really, really are serious about having a bed all in one color, be sure they're in bloom when you do that. Don't just assume. Now, one of the things that, since I mix my vegetables and my flowers together, this tomato plant, its roots I need to get it planted. But I'm not going to take this and just take it out of there, do what I did to that, and plop it in the ground. Tomatoes are different. These you plant even with where they were in the ground before, in the soil before. These, I'm going to take this one off, this one, maybe this one. I'll have to think about that after I get these others off. And tomatoes don't have to go straight in the ground. Tomatoes will grow roots on this entire stem. So I will plant my tomato with it sideways, with the roots down here, and this much of the stem underground. And it will have an extremely strong root system and grow very well. So this one is going to go home and go in the ground with today, because I've had it for a week and I want to make sure that it's going to survive. But the only exception to planting ground level would be the tomato, and you can make it stronger by doing that. Okay, so you've gotten it out, you've tickled the roots, you put it in the ground, and you cover it with soil. And you need to kind of press it down, get the air pockets out. That way it will be more secure. And water it and mulch it. Now, mulch is any kind of mulch you want to use. And you put it around there, but not up against the stem, not up against the trunk of a tree, ever, because that will it can cause damage to the stem or to the tree. And they told us, you've seen them where the mulch goes up, about like that on the tree trunk. That's a volcano. No volcano. Make it a donut. Leave a little area in the middle around your plant or around the tree, and it will be a healthier, but it will still keep in the moisture in the ground, help with weed control, and also just keep the soil temperature a little more stable. So, no volcano, always a donut. Now, additional tips. If you have an irrigation system, that's great. You can irrigate your flower beds or your vegetable gardens, and that will keep the water going into the soil. You know, if you have a sprinkler system and you watch the water, I water my neighbor's yard sometimes more than I water my own. And the same is true if you use little sprinklers around in your garden or in your flower bed. If you use soaker hoses, anything like that, it will put the water directly into the ground and off the leaves. Some plants don't like to get their leaves wet. Rain is the exception, but the chemicals in the water will help them get burned or scorched, and they could lose leaves. Try to water in the morning when it's cooler. That's the best time to water. If you don't water in the morning, the next best time is in the evening. But watering in the middle of the day is not good. It's hot and it evaporates so much faster. So we want to get the most we can out of our watering time. And then the mulch, and then follow the recommendations for fertilizing. Every plant is a little different, so be sure and look. I'm going to go back to the first one on the soaker hoses or the watering. I've learned 2 lessons the hard way. I did not water around the foundation as much as I should have, because I was watering my plants out here, and anyway, multiple thousands of dollars later, my foundation is level again. But the guy who leveled it said if I would use soaker hoses around the foundation, that would keep enough moisture in that it shouldn't happen again. Just a tip. I don't know if it's true or false, but I will try anything not to do that again. The second thing is the newer hoses, the metal in the connection, the metal in your faucet, they will weld themselves to each other. A couple of years ago, I couldn't get my hose off, couldn't get it off with a wrench, couldn't get it off with that stuff you spray on it to make it loosen, so I had to call the plumber and have the faucet removed and replaced. And he said, you know, if you will just unscrew it and screw it back on every week or 2 weeks, this won't happen. He was at my house the day before yesterday and replaced 2 faucets. I left them on and couldn't get them off. So I wrote it down. Don't, please. Every time, once a week when I water on Mondays, I will take them off, put them back on. I don't want to have to do it a 3rd time. Okay, fertilizing, yes. So we are always around. We're always ready to help you. We have a website, we have a Facebook page, we have a YouTube channel, and then I gave the references that we use a lot in doing our gardening. And one thing is, besides the plants, be sure and keep your tools clean. If you have a plant that's diseased or buggy or anything at all, if you use the same tool without cleaning them, you could take that to the plant you work on the next, and the next, and the next. So be sure and clean them. I usually use just Clorox wipes when I'm outside. You can use other things. If you're going to be storing them for a while, you can actually get a tub and fill it with sand and add some oil to it, and then just stick them in there, and you can leave them like that for a while. It could be your big tools. I did that with my shovel. I have a big bucket, and I put my shovel in there, and that way it doesn't rust. And you shouldn't leave tools on the concrete, because the concrete temperatures vary. my exception to that, I do have all mine hanging except for a hoe and a shovel by the back door, the garage door, and the front door, because we have rattlesnakes. And I need my first line of defense. But other than that, but I do rotate them out so that they don't. And if you leave them in the sun, that damages them too. I have some old tools that were my dad's, my granddad's, and they had the old wooden handles, and they get kind of splintery. You can sand those down and put oil on them, and they will rejuvenate them, make them where you don't get splinters every time you use them. So it's important to have know your soil, pick your plants correctly, and then tend to them correctly. There is a book that's written by a couple of ladies who call themselves, and I can't remember what they call themselves, it just poofed. Anyway, they're talking about gardening in the second half of life, and that caught my eye, because I want to continue gardening as long as I'm alive. But they said that you need to find easier ways to do things, make your garden easier to take care of. And they said there's a big difference between two words. One is tend, where you're tending to your plants, you're tending to your landscape, and the other one is toil. That's what we don't want to do, is have to be out there toiling. So, make sure that whatever you do, it fits your abilities to take care of it. And you'll be happier, and your plants will be happier because you're tending to them. So, does anybody have a question? I think that was it. Yeah.
I have a lot.
Yeah, a lot. Okay.
Yeah, because the watering.
Yes.
That's the part that I have a hard time. Because now I'm learning that you also have to take into consideration the humidity and the wind. So I know I'm a bit lazy. So does it mean that during hot weathers, especially when it's really dry, that I have to water it twice? I only want to water it once a day or every other day?
Well, actually, if you're talking about grass.
No, not grass.
Okay, plants. But you can get a moisture meter and use it. I'm old-fashioned, and this is my moisture meter. And if I stick it in the ground and it's dry, I know it's time to water. If it's still moist, I'm not going to water. Okay. So I don't have a good, definite, yes, always water it twice, just feel.
So if it's really hot, especially during the summer,
yes.
Do I just leave it dry because the sun is scorching, and I just water at the end of the day when the sun sets?
Water it in the morning.
Yeah, I already watered it, but
okay.
Believe me, it
right.
dries up during lunchtime, and the hottest at 12 to 3, 4. Oh my God, because I have a raised bed, it's 6, especially raised beds, they dry up so fast. So I'm like, do I water it? I know it's really dry now.
Right.
So when do I water? Do I wait until the sun is out? Because
if you water it during the middle of the day when the sun is going to hit it, if you get water on the leaves, it can burn them or scorch them.
Water it, but just make sure I don't wet the leaves.
Yeah, but I wouldn't water with the sun shining on them. I always, the top may look dry, but if you put your finger down there may still be adequate moisture underneath the soil. Yeah, you check it and see.
Because the tendency is like, I want to save it.
I know.
Maybe I need to put it.
And that's where the drip system comes in, right?
Yeah, and also mulch.
And mulch.
Cover that ground, and it will help prevent a lot of that moisture loss.
Right.
And so if you get a nice big covering of mulch, the soil will actually stay pretty moist underneath.
It does.
And so you won't have to water nearly as much.
Yeah, and on lawns it's the same way. You can put tuna cans out, and if you have a sprinkler system, and see how much water, or if you use a regular sprinkler, the one that's oscillating, if you put that out, you can see how much water is in that can. That's the cheap way. You can buy the little things you put around, and you need to be watering an inch when you water, because if you water more and deeply, the roots are going to go deeper, and they will get to the water under the soil. If you're watering frequently and just a little bit, then the roots are at the top, and they're going to need more water until you can get them to go down.
But yeah, I water really deep, but I just noticed it just during summer, especially last summer, because it's a raised bed, it dries up so fast because everything, the sun and the humidity is so low.
Right.
Yes, and and the other thing, what do you do if the roots are balled up? You know.
Balled up?
Yes.
If they're real, yeah, you break them apart. And sometimes if they are so tight, you can use a knife and cut.
Oh, that's okay.
And yes, I always go, ouch, ouch, when I'm doing that, because I'm always afraid I'm hurting the plant, but I'm really not. I'm freeing it up. But you can do that. And if you ever have a tree or shrub that when it comes out of the pot, the roots are girdling, they're never going to go straight down. And so that's going to be a stunted and weaker plant, tree or shrub. So I'm a big proponent of mulch. When I mentioned that don't do things beyond your capability, last year I bought 160 bags of mulch. I mean, that's a lot of mulch. And I unloaded it, I did it like 20 bags at a time because my capability is 20 bags. I can't lift and carry that many more. And I mulched around my trees, mulched my flower beds, and it made the biggest difference. And I need to remulch this year because it breaks down, which is exactly what you want it to do. That helps your soil, and I will redo that. But mulching is the key to a lot of it. Soil temperature, moisture in the soil.
But the thing is, it takes so much work because I only plant, the easy ones like marigolds. Because what happens is, if I don't mulch, it's so easy when they start dying, I can just dig and then plant seeds and then it would grow. So while this is dying, this is growing. But if I have mulch, you have to clean it up. And I'm like, what? Like, I'm not enjoying this anymore. Because it's too much work.
Exactly.
I'm like, so that's why I was wanting to know that if there's a way to water it wherein the moisture is kept, a bit of cheating, so that it's the easiest garden, because that's just what I want to do.
Right.
I'm not that.
I have a drip system in my flower beds that it goes anyway. The drip system, and then I mulch over it, and that keeps the water down there on the soil, and it stays in really good shape. Now, I know I probably need to replace it. I mean, it's 20 some odd years old, so it's not as efficient as the newer ones, but it still works. I check the zones every spring before, I start heavy duty planting, and it's just, they did a good job when they put that one in, but I really do, I think mulch is the key. John was right. I'm a big proponent of mulch, and there are so many varieties. Now, I do not do the rubber mulch because it has a different consistency. The wood mulch, it's a natural thing. Some people don't like to use the colored mulches because of the chemicals or whatever in them, but there are lots of good things you can use as mulch. I also try to put like some shredded newspaper under it because that will decompose and help the soil too. No? What else?
Oh, and then I just also noticed that how come that the seeds from my plants germinate better here as compared to buying seeds that are on the market? Is it because it's planted here? Why is that?
Okay, the seeds that you got where?
The seeds that are from my garden.
Oh, from your garden?
Yes. Why do they germinate better than the ones that you buy from a market or from from stores?
Yeah, that's a good question.
I noticed
And yes, but a lot of times it's because that plant has acclimated to that area. And so it grew, the mama and daddy plants grew well there, and so these seeds are coming directly from them. Now the exception to that is a hybrid, because they do not always come back true to what your plant is. But a lot of I let my seeds fall, and yes, they do come up. I rarely buy seeds. I mean, you have friends who have plants or seeds that will be happy to share with you.
So it's better that it comes from this area. Okay.
Right, and it's the same thing with plants. You can go places and see these absolutely beautiful plants, but check where they would be rated to grow. If it's not a 7B or 8A, that's our climate. But also look at the soil type, because if it says needs acidic soil, unless you amend your soil heavily, it's not going to do as well. And well-drained soil too. Some of them really don't want their feet wet, and so you need to plant it where it will drain better.
And that's why I was like irritated, like when you go to Home Depot and then they're selling peonies and ranunculus, and I'm like, oh, they're so beautiful, and then you plant them and it's so hot here. The next thing you know, you just get greens, no flowers, or they die.
Right.
So like, why are you selling this stuff? You're just baiting me.
Well, a lot of the places they don't necessarily order for themselves. These big stores, they are on a contract, like all of the stores get from a certain grower, and they just send in whatever. I was at one of them the other day, and one of the reps from the grower was there, and and was telling someone how to grow. I don't even remember what it was. I'm standing there going,
Yeah, that's why I'm like,
No.
At least I'm learning this. I now know that you really have to look at the soil.
You do, yeah, and one of your best friends is going to be I look up stuff all the time. I will say, oh, I know this grows here, but when does it need to be planted? Bulbs, I'll use bulbs. I love bulbs because I love irises, I love daylilies, I love
Daffodils.
Oh yeah, all of these, but they're planted at different times. And you also have to plant them the way they're supposed to be planted. We went out to a house one time because this sweet lady said, I planted all these bulbs and nothing is coming up. And so a couple of us went over to visit, and so we kind of dug a little bit, very carefully. I didn't want to mess anything up. And when we looked, she had planted all of them upside down. Now, sometimes, and they're not going to grow upside down. They would have to grow down and then up and then up, and that's usually too much in our soil to do that much growth. But so we turned them and, tried to help get her bulb garden back in place. But, bulbs are kind of hard. I look at them sometimes and I go, okay, which is top and which is bottom? And I give everything the opportunity to live. That's what I always say. I buy things that look pretty dead because they're at a discounted rate. I also, we had some bulbs that we had harvested from one of our projects, and whoever had been in charge of taking care of them, they got a little hot and they got mushy. And we thought, well, those are goners. I said, no, we're going to plant these things because you never know. They might get happy once they get underground. And so we planted them, and we had the most beautiful tub of caladiums that you have ever seen. So don't give up on something just because it looks bad. And I always let it look dead for a while before I will take it out.
What's the cheapest way to amend clay soil here?
I have used expanded shale, and you can use compost. And yes, but
What's the mixture like? 1 part compost,
it depends. You have to kind of read the bag because different ones have different. What's in the bag is different, and like compost. You use your own compost, right? And,
I
but,
use as much compost as I can get into the soil.
but you also,
Break the soil, the clay soil, and then you mix it?
Yep.
right. But you can also get it at a number of places here in town. You can buy it bagged, you can get it from nursery places. They sell it, by the scoop or by the whatevers you want to buy it.
The Evelyn brush thing?
They don't do compost anymore. They no. They have,
They have mulch, they don't have compost.
yeah, they have mulch, but no compost, right. Because they did it one time, but they quit doing it. And so just, you have, it's not going to happen overnight either. It takes a while. We've been in this house we're living in 20-something years, and I am still working on the soil. Last year was a dry year, and I had cracks in the yard. I was watering the 3 times a week. I was watering the inch at a time. I was doing by the book what you're supposed to do, but I still had the cracks. I think everybody had a crack or two in their yard. Yes, but I just kept trying my best, and we got a rain and they closed back up. The only exception was I watered heavily around the foundation, because if I see soil cracks coming that direction, I want to make sure that soil is not going to shift. If you have heavy clay, when it gets dry, it separates. When it gets wet, and that if you have a concrete foundation, they say that can be a problem. And so I'm trying to prevent it. But I will run a soaker hose, like not during the day when the sun's going to evaporate when I'm watering, but I'll let it run maybe early in the morning or at night and try and keep that wet, and that keeps my plants wet too. So, 2 for 1. Okay, any other questions? Okay, you can always reach us. We have, you can email us, you can call the extension office, and they'll get everything to us, and we'll be happy to help you. And we have the plant sale going on right now. You have until noon to order online, and then 8 to 1 tomorrow in the Modern Living Mall, whatever's left from the online sale. So, thank you.